Welcome to Gruesome. It is your April. Nope.
March.
Let me start that over. Welcome to Gruesome. It is your March bonus episode. Tonight we're going to talk to you about the Shankill Butchers. They suck.
They super suck. Yeah, they're not.
Super suck. If you hear me coughing, I have a sinus infection from California. If you happen to see my daughter in the background when you watch this or hear her, she is still awake at 11:11 at night.
Make a wish.
I wish she would go to sleep. And my husband went camping and I did not.
It's so cold. Like, I don't even.
My allergies are shit right now. Like, I am already, like, I have that tickle in the back of your throat where you just, like, want to cough and cough and cough. I don't have COVID. I don't have the flu. I got swabbed. But he was like, "Do you want to go camping?" And I was like,
No,
I don't want to go camping in the middle of the summer. One, it's like 40 degrees. And two, I feel like shit. Bill and I will stay home.
It was snowing out this morning.
But then he tricked me and he let her nap today. So she's still awake.
She normally doesn't nap, huh?
No, she doesn't nap. We are anti-naps for Bill, but she... Anyways.
She did today.
Yeah. So
all right, we can start this out just in case Bill wakes up, comes blazing in. And to start it out, we're going to have a history lesson, which is very exciting. I know.
It's my favorite. And I'm not being sarcastic.
I know. I agree. I love it. And actually, as I was learning about this case, I felt very invested in Irish history. I was fully like, I'm going to learn more about this. And we're going to talk about Ireland and Ulster oilism. And to break it down, because before I started reading about this, I knew nothing about Ireland or how it was. I wasn't familiar with how it's set up. And Ireland is made up of the Republic of Ireland, which is sovereign, and Northern Ireland, which is a part of the UK. And Ulster is one of the 4 traditional Irish provinces in Northern Ireland. It has 9 counties. 6 of them are in the UK, but 3 of them are in the Republic of Ireland. Its largest city is Belfast, and Belfast has a very high percentage of Protestants. It's like 50%, which compared to the rest of all of Ireland is a lot because most of Ireland's Catholic. But the word Ulster now, and we're going to use it probably pretty frequently throughout this, it's not really used unless it's in reference to one of those 3 counties that still belong to the Republic of Ireland. And now in Northern Ireland, there was a history of fighting between like the Protestant majority, even though it's 50% now, I think it used to be much larger, and the Catholic minority. So much so that in 1969, the violence got to a point where the British Army legitimately had to come in and keep the peace. And I don't know, I hear about stuff like that and I think it's happening in like the 1500s and the 1600s.
Yeah.
But this was going on to like 93.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty modern, I think, you know.
They didn't come to the final agreement to like how Northern Ireland, like their political was going to be divided until 1998.
Yeah, this is pretty recent as far as major historical wars, and this was a war. Mm-hmm. In 1985, England and the Republic of Ireland were both like, okay, we'll get a handle on Northern Ireland, and it took until 93 for like them to figure out a resolution, hence the 6 counties and the 3 counties belonging to like a split. And that became an issue because like the recent Brexit and all kinds of things, but we want to focus on this very specific time period between like 75 and 82, and it's extended out of there, but this specific time it's called the Troubles. And it's a war. It's the war that was going on in Ireland. And we're going to say the words Protestant and Catholic a lot, but it's not really... You should know that the war wasn't specifically a religious thing. It's presented as that, but it was
Mhm.
really like the status of Northern Ireland. Historically, Unionists were Protestant, and the Unionists wanted to stay in the United Kingdom. And in my head, I had it backwards because I hear loyalist, my brain's like, oh, they don't want to be a part of the UK, they want to be Ireland, but they
Because we
actually
think
did.
of like America and like
Yeah,
the American
exactly.
loyalists were British, like sympathize,
Yeah. So that is what I was picturing in my head, but it's totally backwards. And Irish nationalists, who historically were Catholic, they wanted Northern Ireland to leave the UK and be a united Ireland. And there are so many things we could talk about during this war. It, I mean, it was a civil rights campaign, so there's going to be a lot of violence and bloodshed anyways, as is our world's history. um but there was a very specific civil rights campaign in Northern Ireland, and they wanted to see discrimination against Catholic nationalists at the hands of Protestant Unionists stopped. They didn't want that anymore. And the Royal Ulster Constabulary, that word is so fun, or we can call them just the cops. It was the cops. They were brutalizing the minority population. So weird, right? Never heard of that happening ever. The main people fighting in this war were like paramilitaries, and one of those paramilitaries was the UVF, and it's the Ulster Volunteer Force. The Ulster Volunteer Force is a terrorist organization. Like, they say paramilitary, they are terrorists. And the offset of the UVS is the Shankill Butchers, who we're going to talk about now. It's a literal gang of serial killers. And Shankill is a road that goes through West Belfast. So that large city, it's just an area of that city. It's like a working class area. And again, this shit was only going down like 40 years ago. So it's pretty fresh. So in this gang, Shankill Butcher starts with Lenny Murphy, or Hugh Leonard Thompson Murphy. He was the youngest of 3 sons born to his parents, William and Joyce. And I'm going to skim kind of over his childhood because there was an actual raise hand.
Can I interject and recommend that we only call him Leonard? Because Lenny sounds cool, and I know that he did not like Leonard. He was probably like,
yeah,
no, call me Lenny.
I try to put him in as Murphy in a lot of these, but if I skip it, just like snap at me or something. Leonard. Okay, yes.
Leonard. Okay.
Leonard Murphy. He is the youngest of 3 sons born to parents William and Joyce. Joyce was 16 when she met her husband, for the record. I'm going to skim over his childhood because there was a war going on, so it was hard. I have no doubt that it was hard. He lived in a Protestant area, but he had what was considered a very Catholic last name, so his family was kind of like ostracized, and they moved around a lot because of that. He went to Argyle Primary School, where he was the school bully. He would legitimately pull a knife on kids, and then his older brothers would give him backup in case shit went down. He was arrested for the first time when he was 12. Then he went to Belfast Boys Model School, where he left at 16 and immediately joined the UVF. And these guys are already violent. They're fueled by propaganda that's being spread by, the paramilitary gangs in general, but violence begets violence. But even when the UVF was taken over by people who wanted to change things, it got violent. In 1969, you really saw an amplification of street violence and riots and just general prejudice. I keep saying prejudice against Catholics. It's just amping up. And Leonard was about it. He joined UVF to really get in on that violence. Like, he was a sadist. There's a guy, he wrote a book about the Shankill killers. His name's Martin Dillon. And he believes that Murphy's first murder was in 1972 when he was like 19 or 20 years old. Martin Dillon also, he wrote the book is called A Case Study on Mass Murder. He had to leave Northern Ireland for his own safety after this book was published because the gang was still existed and they were threatening him. So he got out of there. But in 1972, these murders occurred prior to the formation of the Shankill Butchers. So this is pretty much specifically Leonard Murphy. The first recorded murder was that of Francis Arthurs. He was 34. And on July 22nd, 1972, Francis was tortured and stabbed by Murphy and shot at around 4 a.m. before he was dumped into the street. In July and August, there were so many unsolved murders that it's hard to track who was responsible for a lot of them. But Thomas Madden, and there's about 3 others whose names are unknown, are ones that are pretty much definitely linked to Murphy. One of the unknown men was tortured and stabbed before being shot in Shankill near a lockup garage, which I think is an unattached garage or a storage facility. It's a building away from a residence that you can put things in.
I had to look up a lot of the terms. Yeah, I was like,
yes.
what is this? What is this?
We're going to be so fluent in Ireland.
Or we're going to get a lot of, like, that is
You're
not
wrong. Good thing it's a bonus.
And it's people that like us.
Murphy was also involved in the murder of Thomas Madden, who I just mentioned. He suffered a horrible fate. He was abducted on August 12th, 1972, taken to another lockup garage. He was tortured for 6 hours while they suspended him from a wooden beam with a rope in the garage. They were essentially hanging him from the roof of the garage, and he was stabbed 147 times.
I read that and I was like, Jesus.
Yeah, before they strangled him to death. So the stabs weren't even the fatal blow. His body was just left in the doorway. I honestly think that Murphy started murdering people at a much younger age.
I agree.
Like the ferocity of the murders that he commits, they lead me to believe that this is not like a first time go around for this guy.
No, I agree.
On September 22nd, 1972, another Catholic man, William Matthews, was found murdered with Murphy's signature, torture, beating, stabbed, before being dumped in the Balligo-Martin River. Not even a week later, a Protestant man, 32-year-old William Pavis, was shot in his own home after allegedly selling weapons to the Provisional Irish Republican Army.
Do you want to go lay down? Sure. Go get your tablet. I'll be there in just a minute, okay?
So cute. So they thought he was allegedly selling weapons to the Provisional Irish Republic Army. And this guy, this murder, is part of the reason Murphy finally gets arrested, along with an accomplice, Mervyn Connor. What a name, Mervyn. They had been sent by the UVF to take care of him for, working with the enemy because he was Protestant, but they thought he was selling guns to Catholics. They had only even heard about him because he'd been in jail for a year for illegally selling firearms, and he had sold a rifle. He sold a rifle to a Catholic priest that he went hunting with. And that was why they thought he was selling guns to like the enemy. Because when he was in prison, the UVF was like, you're fraternizing with the Catholics and the enemy, and if you're going to sell guns to this priest, you'd sell them to anyone if given the opportunity. He was threatened so often in prison that he told the prison psychiatrist that he was going to be assassinated. And he was right. As soon as he was out on parole, the second he was out, the UVF put a hit out on him and sent Leonard and Connor to do the job. Pavis was at his house on parole, and Leonard, he showed up asking him, "You have any guns for sale?" And he said, "Nope, I don't. I don't plan on selling any. I got to go back to jail tomorrow. I don't have anything for you." Murphy made conversation, and as he was preparing to leave, he pulled out a pistol and shot him point blank. He hopped on a motorcycle with Connor and rode a distance before they abandoned the bike. Plenty of witnesses saw this happen. It was the middle of the day. But Murphy and Connor weren't arrested until months later. While Murphy was in a lineup for the witnesses, he stepped out of line and yelled that he didn't want to be there and it was bullshit, blah, blah. He essentially caused a big scene. And he did that because he knew that if he did go to trial, a jury would have to consider that he was identified as the killer because he was the most prominent person in the lineup. He caused that ruckus that made him the most visible person and not actually a murderer, you know? They just picked me because I yelled.
Exactly.
Yeah, and the detectives knew that's what he was doing. They realized it and they were like, we got to find a way to put this guy down. He did not talk at all. He could not be broken. All he would say to police was that it was their job to prove he was guilty of these murder charges. And he even said that witnesses only picked him out because he was mad about being in that lineup and caused a scene. Mervyn was different, though. He was afraid of Leonard. A lot of people were. But detectives offered him a deal. In January of 1973, they told him, "Give up Lenny and we'll be lenient. You slap on the wrist. It'll be all good." The trouble with this was that the police and guards that worked at the prison were also members of the UVF. They tried to talk to Mervyn Connor secretly, but the UVF and Leonard all found out that Connor had agreed to sell him out just to save himself. So he's listed as a high-risk prisoner. He's not allowed to eat with Leonard or the other people who associate with him. Eventually, he gets a bottle of orange juice, and someone had ground up a light bulb into it.
Ugh.
He went to the hospital for severe stomach cramps, but survived because the glass all sank to the bottom. Like, that wouldn't even occur to me as a way, like, just grind up a light bulb in his orange juice. That'll do him in. He survived again. Leonard worked in the prison hospital, and he had access to cyanide. Just
Who
the 70s, man.
And I talk about this later on, but this is things like this keep happening, which is why no one would talk against the Butchers. They knew that they had people on the inside that were protecting them, dragging their feet with investigations. Like, it just
moving stuff around. And in March of 73, he had gotten some of that cyanide and he poisoned a pot of custard with it. It was marked for where Connor ate lunch. But I guess the cyanide had changed the color of it, so he didn't eat it, which I thought was weird because cyanide is colorless, tasteless. It's like the thing. Oh, wait, maybe that's arsenic. Maybe I've got my poisons mixed up. So I guess it did. The cyanide changed the color of the custard. Then, on April 24th, Murphy had a pass to leave the prison hospital wing because that's what you give violent reoffenders is passes to run amok in the prison. He walked directly to Mervyn Connor's cell. The guards that were supposed to be watching his cell were watching TV with prisoners in a completely different room. And I say that they were watching TV, but pretty sure they just slipped away.
Yep.
He called Connor over to talk to him, grabbed him by the throat, and forced him to write something down before he poured the cyanide into his mouth. Mervyn died the next morning. The guy that ran the prison was pissed. He tried to get police to investigate it instead of prison authorities, and the police just never showed up. I'm sure that they were very busy given the times, but they also just didn't think that it was worth investigating. And it really made the rest of the UVF guys fear Murphy because he would absolutely kill you and nothing would stop him if you got in his way.
Mm-hmm.
One of the UVF leaders said that Murphy doesn't frighten me, but it's what he would do to my wife and kids if I crossed him and then didn't dispose of him quickly. You sent me your cough from across the computer. I think the crazy part about Lenny murdering Mervyn was that before he died, the thing he had him write down was a confession that exonerated Murphy of William Pavis's murder. And he was acquitted for it. He also almost succeeded in escaping from prison that same year. He swapped clothes with an inmate and was preparing to leave. He just almost walked right out of the building. Murphy drew the same tattoos that the other inmate had on his own arms, and the morning that the man was supposed to leave, Murphy just walked out instead in his clothes. He got all the way to the front gate, and a guard was like, "Let me see the tattoo." And the ink that he had drawn on himself with was smudged. So he got returned to his cell. But to think he got that far just walking out. He did serve jail time for being involved with the murder, but he had to be sent to a different prison because he caused a ruckus. And he's sent to a prison that was like a camp. It was like a camp prison, manual labor, and he hated it because the other one had been pretty chill. He had a lot of friends on the inside, right?
Mm-hmm.
At this new camp prison, he destroyed their hospital area, stole a ton of amphetamines. He should have been booted from the camp for it, but he was allowed to stay because of these UVF links in the prison system. They just they made it easy for him to do what he wanted. He was barely punished. And inevitably, like new government formation and paramilitary agreements, people start coming to agreements and, new regimens are being put into place. And when he was released on May 13th, 1975, he was not happy about it. He was not happy about any agreements happening whatsoever because he wanted war. New military members took over the UVF and they were like, it's our goal to defend loyalists against their enemy, but we're not waging war on anyone except for armed Republicans determined to overthrow Ulster and turn it into the Irish Republic. Those are the only people that we are going after. And Murphy was like, nope, that's not the only people we're going after because he hated Catholics, he hated the Irish Republic, he hated everything. He decided to form an offshoot of the UVF secretly because he didn't want to have to run his plans by anyone. He didn't want to take orders from anyone. As soon as he got back to Shankill Road, he started meeting at the Brown Bear pub with some of his new buds from prison, Chuck Berry. I'm serious, Chuck Berry, and Basher Bates. One of his brothers was a member. He also had a BFF that was always around him. I could not find that name anywhere. I think
Mr. A?
Yeah, Mr. A and Mr. B. I think they're still alive.
Well, Mr. B is his brother.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I knew I wrote that.
Mr. A is never. He's not. You will never find his name.
Yeah, I guarantee he's still alive, and so it's just been like hella wiped. Anyways, Lenny was like, okay, we need like 15 or 20 more dudes for this motley crew. And one, it was a motley crew.
It is.
One of these men was William Moore. He was 26. He lived with his widowed mother, and he pretty much laid low. He thought Lenny was a badass. Leonard was a badass, but he's not. He's an asshole. Moore was a meat packer. He had been a meat packer. and he had been dating the boss's daughter. So she got him out of the packing plant and into the carving room. And she also gave him the money to buy a black taxi car so that he could get out of the carving room. When he joined Murphy and subsequently started this taxi service, he left the meat plant and took with him several knives and meat cleavers. For them, they had this brilliance behind having a black taxi because it was the same kind of vehicle that the IRA used to get around. So suddenly they had this ability to infiltrate behind enemy lines. By September of 1975, they gathered about 20 young men endeared with Leonard Murphy and willing to do what he asked of them. And by the way, Leonard has a wife and daughter now, too. He's not just some single guy mad at the world. I mean, he is mad at the world, but on October 2nd, 1975, at 8 o'clock in the morning, these are very prompt criminals. All the times, time to go to work.
It's not funny, but
it's not funny.
The crimes are not funny, but the times are very precise.
It's organized crime, I guess. So that makes sense.
Very organized.
This is why it's organized. So 8 a.m., Leonard and some select members of the newly formed Shankill Butchers laid out a plan that involved them soon getting into a van that at that very moment was being stolen so that they could go to this Catholic family-owned business, Casey's Wholesale Wine and Spirits, and they were going to hold the owner hostage and rob him. That was the whole plan. The owner wasn't there. Two sisters, Marie McGrattan, 47, and Frances Donnelly, 35, and two 18-year-olds, Gerard Grogan and Thomas Osborne, were the ones working at Casey's that day. Also all Catholic people. At 10 a.m., Lenny and his associates got into the stolen van and drove 5 minutes to Casey's. Also, why do you steal a van to drive 5 minutes? That seems silly. Where he gave Marie...
It's just an extra step.
It's you know what we should do? Steal a van. Okay. Don't you have a black taxi? Couldn't you just whip that in?
To the shop.
So they drove, and when they get there, they give Marie an order for liquor. It's very crudely written on paper. Gerard, one of the 18-year-olds, turned up to help her, and they invited the men inside. Once inside, Leonard and the women went up to the office to handle the business side of things. And there they held the women at gunpoint and demanded the money that was on the premises. Unfortunately, Marie said there was none because it's just too early in the day.
It's 8 o'clock in the morning.
We just opened. It's a liquor store. Murphy angrily tore apart the office looking for the money and found nothing. And he shot both of the women in the head. After asking the two boys for their religion and hearing the answer, he shot them both as well. They drove the van out, and shortly after, they lit it on fire. Thomas Osborne, when he was shot, they missed his head, and he was shot through the neck. So he actually made it out into the road and was taken to the hospital, but unfortunately, he did die 3 weeks later when they were trying to remove a blood clot. Marie had told Lenny that there was no money on the property, but that was because it was hidden in her car. She was supposed to take it to another business later. Noel and William Green, two of the participants in this botched robbery, were arrested, but they refused to reveal anything about Lenny or William Moore, the other two criminals, and they minimized their own roles in the crime, saying, We didn't know that's what we were doing. I was in the car. That kind of a thing.
Yep.
And then Connie's going to take it from there.
So the song goes, the Shankill Butchers ride tonight. You better shut your windows tight. They're sharpening their cleavers and their knives and taking all of their whiskey by the pint. The Decemberists, I can't talk either tonight, wrote a song about the horrors that this area faced during the Reign of Terror. After the 4 murders, that was just the beginning. The Shankill Butchers would become the boogeyman, the monster outside, the reasons you locked your doors and didn't go anywhere, fueled by the desire to murder and torture Catholics. Because, as witnesses would later say, the only thing apparent about Leonard Murphy was his absolute disdain for anyone Catholic. He made it a point of conversation for anyone that he would talk to. So for several years, this town lived in fear. On about a month after the 4 murders, the gang abducted Francis Crossman. The 34-year-old father was walking towards the city center around 12:30 on November 25th, 1975. What he didn't know is he was just walking is Benjamin Edwards, Archie Waller, Leonard Murphy, and William Moore had been prowling around areas where there were Catholic churches and the areas where there was a high population of Catholic residents, just looking for a victim. Upon spotting Crossman, Leonard jumped out of the taxi that Moore was driving and hit him in the back of the head with what our friends across the pond call a wheel brace, but what we Americans call a tire iron, just to
Oh,
disorient him. Crossman was dragged into the car by Edwards and Waller. He was ferociously beaten. They used beer mugs, their fists, that same tire iron. It was agonizing hell for Crossman, to even say the least. Murphy repeatedly told him, "I'm going to kill you, you bastard." The gang stopped the car and Crossman was dragged into an alleyway where Murphy delivered the final fatal and what would become his signature wound. He slit his throat with a butcher knife so deep that he almost decapitated him. And just as quickly as they appeared, they were gone again, leaving Crossman's body to be found by an elderly woman the next day. His body was so badly beaten and the wound to his neck was so severe that his family couldn't have an open casket at his funeral because he didn't even look like himself.
oh, that's awful.
Not even a week later, an internal dispute between rival UVF companies, because remember, the Shankill Butchers were kind of like doing their own thing. So this dispute left Archie Waller gunned down, and like I said before, he had been involved in the Crossman murder. So I guess like in the beginning of October, um, Waller had accidentally shot a man named Stuart Robinson during what was supposed to be a kneecapping, which is like a punishment shooting where they literally shoot your knees out. So what was supposed to be just like this punishment shooting, like the guy died. And as we know, no good deed goes unpunished. So a rival UVF member shot Waller down at a bar, murdered him. So Murphy is pissed that Waller was killed by this rival UVF member. So he has the man, Noel Shaw, brought before him at the Lawnbrook Club and held what they call the kangaroo court, which is like a trial right then and there. He proceeds to pistol whip Shaw almost to death before shooting him in front of the 20 men that were there. Then, like the psychopath that he is, he just turns around and goes back to drinking his beer. William Moore, the taxi driving accomplice from Crossman's murder, and John Murphy, Leonard's brother, put his body in a laundry basket and proceeded to drive it a half a mile down the road before they just tossed it off to the side of the road.
Ugh, I hate that. They do. They just toss them wherever they land.
And so I used to watch Sons of Anarchy, right? I've watched The Sopranos, and I used to think, like, how real could this shit be? But between the UVF, the Shankill Butchers, and the IRA, it is absolutely crazy in Northern Ireland during this time. It's like a Sons of Anarchy episode every single day. And like it's not just these murders, it's bombings, like beatings, just lawlessness. And it's so insane. So the brutality just continues from here. On January 10th, 1976, 25-year-old Edward McCade was killed in a drive-by shooting. He was killed just for being Catholic. That's it. Literally the only reason. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time. On February 6th, once again, late at night, so actually like early morning of February 7th, Thomas Quinn was walking down the street in the same area as Crossan when he was abducted again by Leonard Murphy Moore and Bobby Basher Bates, which I hate that he has such a cool nickname. I
Yeah,
hate
it
that.
does suck.
He was, like Crossan, badly beaten, stabbed numerous times with a butcher knife, and his throat was slit to the point that he was almost decapitated. His body was found that same evening, and someone actually called the Belfast newspaper to report the murder before they called the police.
Jeez Louise.
A, cou-
Priorities.
a couple of weeks later, same area, February 23rd, 1976, Frances Quinn was murdered in the same fashion after being abducted in the same area. She was stabbed to death, beaten. Her throat was slit almost to the point of decapitation. Her body was found the same day. She was only 24. A woman discovered her body, and this is actually when the term the Shankill Butchers was coined. This is what was used in the media headlines, and Murphy loved it. He loved it, which I can't even imagine like seeing headlines like the Shankill Butchers slaughter another person. Oh, it's awful. And Meg touched on the history that was going on in Northern Ireland at the time. So the IRA and, like the UVF, the IRA, they're just going like it's literally like Meg said, it's a war. And like we know that there's a lot more history than like we know there's a lot of details and stuff. We could literally do a whole episode or 5 just on this.
Yeah, I think there could probably be an entire podcast just about this time in Ireland.
Exactly. And the Protestants and Catholics were largely segregated, which is what made it so easy for the butchers to stalk and pick their victims. So they have this taxi that looks just like what, the IRA was cruising around in. So like Megan said, they were behind enemy lines and they were just like, this is an area we can literally hunt in. So they just assumed that anyone in these areas were Catholic. They didn't give a shit if they were right or wrong. They were like, meh, we're assuming that they're Catholic.
If they're here, they're too close to Catholics anyways.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Jimmy Nesbitt was an inspector who started investigating the murders. He knew that Crossan, Quinn, and Rice were all killed by the same person or persons. The murders were practically identical, and their bodies were all dumped right off Shankill Road. The woman who had discovered Rice's body had actually heard people talking in the area the night before, and she recognized the taxi as one that they called it an ex-London type. So they brought in, like anyone who had one of these taxis, they brought in. So William Moore's taxi was actually examined for clues, but nothing was found because they had cleaned the cab so well. And Murphy was obsessed with crimes. Like Megan said, he knew how to act if he was in a lineup. He did his due diligence to minimize the likelihood of clues being left behind. But because the taxi was so like obviously easily identifiable at this point, Murphy made him destroy the taxi. And then he bought a yellow car, which is ironic to me. Like when I think of taxis now, I think of
I think yellow cars, yeah. Yellow
So
cab. Sorry,
con-
go ahead.
continuing their reign of terror, on March 11th, 1976, Leonard Murphy tried to murder a woman in a drive-by shooting in Cliftonville. He threw the gun out, but was arrested the next day when he was trying to retrieve the gun that he had used. He was arrested for attempted murder. He was reprimanded and ultimately sentenced to 12 years in prison because he had entered a plea bargain. The attempted murder charge was dropped, and he pled guilty to the lesser weapons charge. Murphy was sentenced on October 11th, 1977. And the police had their suspicions that he was part of the Shankill Butchers based on everything they knew about him, his criminal history, and the fact that he was very much like, I hate all Catholics. They should all die. Like that was,
Yeah.
and it was literally to anyone who would listen to him. So one would think like, okay, the main guy is behind bars. Like this is going to stop. No, he thought this out. He directed his right-hand man, the man that we call Mr. A, that he wanted the Butchers to continue their quote cutthroat killings so that people wouldn't think that he had anything to do with the murders. Moore, the taxi man, was now the commander of the Butchers. So he was like, yeah, we're going to keep this going. On October 2nd, 1976, I'm sorry, on August 2nd, 1976, 49-year-old Cornelius Neeson was found brutally beaten. He was actually alive when he was found, but like his previous victim, he died very shortly after. The cause of death was listed as beaten with a hatchet. On October 30th, 1976, 20-year-old Stephen McCann was found shot, stabbed, and also nearly decapitated near a community center in Belfast. 20 years old, and he was just killed for being Catholic. A few months later, February 3rd, 1977, 15-year-old Joseph Morrissey was found stabbed, beaten, and again nearly decapitated near that same community center. The following month, 43-year-old Francis Cassidy was found brutally stabbed, nearly decapitated. His death was particularly brutal because he also had been just he was just brutally attacked with the hatchet. So these aren't like just stab wounds. Not that it would make it any better, but
No,
it
they're
makes it particularly more gruesome.
they're horrific attacks.
All three men, same Shankill area, all three murders, again, very similar. All three men were Catholic. And Moore was using these murders as like a, hey, look at me, Lenny. I'm worthy to be one of your besties. He was proud that he would deliver the fatal throat slit himself. He had recruited someone that he also knew by the name of Arthur McClay into the Butchers. And he is actually the person who introduced the hatchet. This McClay guy is. Sam McAllister, John Tonsley, David Bell, and Norman Wall were all also involved in the murders. Mr. A, this is part of the reason why his name is not known. He never participated in the murders. He was like the man behind the scenes. He was the organizer. He directed things, but he did not participate, which we'll talk about why that's so important later on. And like I said, the Butchers weren't just randomly attacking Catholics in the street. They were bombing local hangouts as well. On April 10th, 1977, Kevin McNamanin was killed when a bomb went off at a Republican club's Easter Rising parade. He was 7 years old.
Ugh.
And when we're finished on the post that we make, excuse me, on the post that we make about like the case, I'm going to link a page from the Kane Web Service. It's a program based within Ulster University in Northern Ireland. You can literally go year by year and just see the carnage that was caused by both the IRA and the UVF. Not, it's not isolated to just one group. And it's disgusting to see pages and pages and pages of victims from both sides. And honestly, I've never really seen a database like this because it goes like each victim has pictures of most of them, which makes it heartbreaking. And it's one of those like you have to see it to believe it. And if this case interests you, I really think you need to read the book that Meg was talking about too, because it's brutal. Um, on May 10th, 1977, the Butchers were posing as policemen, and they abducted Gerard. Sorry, jeez, sorry guys,
Get a drink.
I ran out.
No.
And so I kept doing it. Oh, my throat's so itchy. Okay. On May 10th, 1977, the Butchers were posing as policemen and abducted Gerard McLaverty. He had been out day drinking, as one does. But Gerard McLaverty endured like unspeakable torture. He was stabbed repeatedly. He had both of his wrists slashed a number of times by Moore and McAllister. He was dumped in a back alley. But what they didn't realize, and what would finally bring these bastards to justice, Gerard McLaverty was alive. Barely, but he was alive. And he survived into the morning when he was able to scream, and a lady heard him and was able to get him medical attention. Now, first, police didn't think that McLaverty's attack was at the hands of the Butchers because they had never left a victim alive before. But that same investigator, Inspector Nesbitt, realized that it was a butcher knife that was used, similar to what had been used before. So he started to piece the information together. So, in a badass, straight out of a movie scene, Investigator Nesbitt devised a plan. The very next week, McLaverty was barely healed, but he was able to go on like a pseudo undercover mission. Police disguised him and they took advantage of a paramilitary strike that was going on where the police would be roaming. And ironically, since he was abducted by a group pretending to be policemen, he was undercover with policemen, driving around, looking to see if he could find the people that brutally attacked him. It didn't take long for McAllister and Benjamin Edwards to be identified. The next day, a huge sweep of their little hangout was conducted, and all of McAllister's associates, including Moore, the taxi driving douchebag new commander, were taken into custody. And I don't know if you felt like this, because we hear Murphy would never give up anything. He was a stonewall. Information was not coming from him. But for the rest of these guys being like thinking they're Billy badass gangsters, it didn't take long for them to start cracking under questions. At first, they would only admit to abducting McLaverty, but Nesbitt knew the size of the knife that was used, so he was able to kind of leverage that as like making them think that they knew more than what they did.
Mm-hmm.
And he was able to have the other detectives use that information to press the guys. And eventually, most of the gang admitted to their part in the hell that the Butchers were inflicting. Even further, some of them started to rat, and Nesbitt realized that the ringleader was none other than Leonard Murphy himself, pulling the strings from behind his prison cell. Leonard Murphy, his brother John, who went by Mr. B, and the unnamed Mr. A were all questioned, but they never said a word. And without the physical evidence, the state prosecution decided that they would not face charges for the murders. Can you fucking believe that?
No, I'm just like, how? How is there not even an inkling of evidence? There's enough for countless other things, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. So stupid.
But Murphy, how did I do this? I
How
was in
could I? I
jail.
was in jail. What an asshole.
And there are some books that think that John Murphy was the real psychopath behind all this, but I don't know. I think they're all
I
equally.
think they're probably all psychopaths.
I
They're
agree.
all monsters.
Throughout all of 77 and 78, the Butchers faced trial. Finally, on February 20th, 1979, 11 men from the Shankill Butchers were convicted of a total of 19 murders. 42 life sentences were handed down. It was the most ever given in a single trial in British criminal history. Moores and Basher Bates were both handed life in prison without the possibility of parole. Both of them had pled guilty to the murders, but unfortunately, the Good Friday Agreement that we had talked about in 1998, which was, like I said, the political agreement that would determine how Northern Ireland was governed, it said that 500 loyalist and Republican prisoners who were sentenced before that day would be released before July 28th, 2000. So both of these fucking monsters were eventually released. And to the disdain of the trial judge, because during the trial, he said, his name is Justice O'Donnell, you pleaded guilty to 11 murders carried out in a manner so cruel and revolting as to be beyond the comprehension of any normal human being. I'm satisfied that without you, many of the murders would not have been committed. I see no reason whatsoever, apart from terminal illness, why you should ever be released. They referred to Leonard Murphy as the monster. They referred to Leonard Murphy as the master butcher, which I just think masturbator. I know I shouldn't.
No, that's accurate, I think. That's what it sounds like.
Investigator Nesbitt was quoted as saying, "The big fish got away," because he did. Leonard Murphy was never charged with these murders. So on July 16th, 1982, Murphy was released from prison after serving his weapons charge. And he immediately turned his life around and he never committed any crimes again. No, I'm just kidding. He immediately started murdering people. He beat a local Protestant man who had a learning disability. He killed a car salesman over money that was owed for a car. He poisoned him first and then he shot him. UDR member, which is like their paramilitary, his name was Thomas Cochran. He was kidnapped by the IRA. So to demand his release, Murphy decided to kidnap a Catholic man to try to arrange an exchange. Joseph Donegan was horrifically tortured. He was beaten, stabbed. Murphy pulled 3 of his teeth. He beat him to death with a shovel. He was arrested for his murder, but once again, there was no physical evidence miraculously to charge him. And this is another reason why people were scared of Murphy and his crew, because they just kind of
floated.
His connection. He just kind of was like, it's like a saran wrap. Like shit just didn't stick to him. Like Teflon. Like it's just boop, boop. And the IRA decided enough is enough with this son of a bitch. And they dealt him some swift street justice.
Street justice.
Street justice. A Provo hit squad waited for him outside of Murphy's girlfriend's house on November 16th, 1982. 2 gunmen jumped out of a van and shot him over 20 times. And at first, people were like, man, this guy has a lot of enemies. We don't know who did this. And the IRA was like, no. We're going to release a statement. So they released a statement that said Lenny Murphy, master butcher, has been responsible for the horrific murders of over 20 innocent nationalists in the Belfast area and a number of Protestants. The IRA has been aware for some time that since his release from prison, Murphy was attempting to reestablish a similar murder gang, which he was.
It's like, if only we could get this more butchers back together, even though it ended horribly for us the first time.
Yeah.
He just thought he was untouchable, you know?
Sorry.
No, you're okay.
The IRA takes this opportunity to restate its policy of non-sectarian attacks while retaining its right to take unequivocal action against those who direct or motivate sectarian slaughter against the nationalist population. So they were like, make no mistake, we did this.
We took that motherfucker down. As they
And
should.
his family denied that he could have ever had anything to do with the Butchers. They said, our sweet Lenny could never. And that's a direct quote.
Your sweet Lenny did.
All of the members were eventually released. William Moore was the last member to be released in 1998, and he lived a lonely life and died in 2009 from natural causes at the age of 60. And he was actually in the process of being questioned for another murder that the Butchers were under suspicion for.
Jeez Louise. Ugh.
Dude, they suck.
They super suck. Like, the ability to form a gang of serial killers is insane to me. The fact that he could find 20 people who were like, yeah, all right, let's do it. Let's ruin lives. Let's destroy community, like just everything. That's nuts.
And I think any situation like this where you are using, like, operating under the guise of religion, it's because we hate the Catholics. No, you are a sadist. Like, you enjoy murdering. Like, this has
you don't cut people's heads off pretty much because you don't like Catholic people.
No, this is taking advantage of a social situation that's happening to further be like, I could kill whoever I want, and people are going to be like, you know what? He's killing the Catholics, and we don't really like the Catholics either.
Yeah.
But the IRA did the same thing with, like, hey, we're going to kill these people. Like, I cannot, and I should say this, I cannot speak on the political situation that was happening. I can't pretend like I know what was going on. I can't pretend like I know the detail, like the actual details from people who live there or people who are from there. So I don't want you thinking like, oh, Connie thinks she's like a Northern Ireland connoisseur. I am not. But all I know, all I can speak of are the facts. And I've seen the victim list from both sides, and they're both disgusting, and they're both terrorist organizations, and just bombings and murders and
gnarly. I'm glad that it's over for them, but you know that prejudice still runs deep, you know. Mm-hmm. I just think that it's probably not that cute over there all the time, even still.
But I mean, we have that here. You have.
I know, and that's what I'm saying though. It runs here in America, yes, and it's been like hundreds of years. Not even hundreds of years, I guess. It's been like what, since the last desegregation, like 60?
Woo. I thought you meant people were getting killed for their race, because I was like, that just happened last year.
No. Yes, that still happens. I just mean like the fact that there was still like a war going on in regard to it like 40 years ago. I think it's probably still a lot more intense there.
I'll be right back.
Not that it's not intense. She's dying. She's dying. Connie, come back. You can blame it all on me. Connie, come back. Okay. We'll wait.
Whew.
I left you a song.
Sorry, guys.
I left you a song you can hear when you edit this.
I'm dying.
I hear that. Anyways, it's hard to compare the two. Yes, that's what I was saying. It's hard to compare the two. I feel like it's probably, since there was still a war going on there pretty much 40 years ago, it's probably still very intense over there.
That's crazy to me.
Yeah. It's crazy to me that there's a war going on right now. Like, I don't know. Can we all just chill the fuck out? That's what I want.
Right?
This just doesn't seem worth it.
I would rather not have any true crime to talk about. Like,
quite frankly, yeah.
Calm the fuck down.
Like, if we keep fighting over gasoline, like, nobody gets it. That's fine. I don't care. As long as it, like, stops, you know?
Can I walk everywhere? Just kidding. I don't care. I'm going to be working from home soon.
You good?
Yeah, this is where I had my, like, spiral. And I feel like this is a safe place to talk about it. You literally have a whole world, billions and billions and billions and billions of people. And there are maybe, and I'm not talking about like House of Representatives and Senate and Parliament and all of these things. I'm talking about like people in charge, the faces of all of these conflicts. There are maybe 100 people, if that.
It's their fault, and we have to like deal with their bullshit.
Like, what the hell? Like, you have the people in Ukraine, people in like innocent people in Russia who have to deal with all the backlash, like everything that's happening because
and they're expected to just sit around and wait for it to be done.
Like, when do we just be like, look, no.
Stop. Just stop it.
You have a bunch of old assholes, and I'm saying this, I don't care, you can a bunch of old assholes on all of the sides. Like, ruining the world for our kids. Like, come on, Jesus Christ, let's just fucking get along. Come on.
Everyone needs to eat a candy bar.
Look, let me
just chill out.
If you're watching this, let me show you how to deal with someone who you don't have the same beliefs as. See?
Don't just walk away. Doesn't fucking matter.
$0 to mind your own damn business.
Mind your biscuits and life will be gravy.
Unless your beliefs are hurting other people, and then catch these hands.
In which case, Connie will not mind her own biscuits.
No.
Okay. Look, I know we're recording this bonus episode, but you sound like you need to like have a voice break.
I know, I do. I'm probably not going to have a voice tomorrow, but it was worth it. That's actually the reason why this episode came out late. Because like we were supposed to record for 2 days and I was in bed. I was like, dude, I love our listeners, but I can't.
So okay.
I can't.
It happens. Life happens. Life comes at you fast.
This is why I don't travel. My tiny little immune system can't handle it.
Your little baby immune.
One little drop of like any type of air that's not like Ohio, and it's like, what did you try to do to us?
Excuse me, you need to stay in your boundary.
Stay in your lane.
Stay in your state lines. Yeah, I'm fine. So
I know it's my allergies. It's my allergies. Cause like at first I was like, holy shit, I got COVID. Like I got COVID. I had my vaccine, I had all my stuff, and I got COVID again. It's like the third time.
Hashtag blessed.
I tested twice and I was like, I got the flu. Like, it's got to be the flu. And one of the perks of like still working at the hospital, I was like, can you put in a flu swab for me?
It's not the flu.
Not the flu. Because I should add, I've never once ran a fever. It's just like all like in my sinuses. And then I had like sinus pressure and now it's like a drip. It's affecting my voice. And I'm going to get off here so I could
Sleep.
edit this and drinks a hottie toddy.
Hottie toddies. Okay.
Whiskey and tea.
Have a hottie toddy night.